at my big age. My big birthday's coming up in a few days' time. But my mother, strangely enough, well, not, I suppose it wasn't strange, but at the time in my heyday when I was getting, well, hundreds, thousands of letters, of course, people wrote letters in those days, and I didn't really have time to see them or sadly not answer them. And she put them in boxes, and I just got them out 2 years ago.
Oh, really? Great.
Because Des Lynham always rings me on my birthday, and he always says, how's the book coming along? And I said, don't be silly, Des, I can't do a book. Anyway, my children got these boxes down, and it's been most interesting to see things I didn't know I had. I suppose one of the standout ones is an invitation from Mr. Hartington Hartford Huntington, I've got that right, I think, the American billionaire, inviting me to Paradise Island to play tennis with him in the Bahamas.
Oh, very nice.
I must be one of the few people never even replied. So I didn't know, and to play, another one was to play Scrabble with the Duke of Bedford at Woburn Abbey. I didn't even know I had the letter.
Oh, wow.
So it's been very interesting for me to find out all these, to find out exactly what was going on at that time. And
you must have been a sudden catapult into stardom for you, I suppose. That suddenly
it was at that time, and I actually had a couple of letters, or 2 or 3 letters. One from Michael Joseph, the publishers, and Curtis Brown, the publishers, asked me to write a book. So before Christmas, I rang up. They're under a new umbrella now, but I said, I'm just replying 60 years late. Haven't heard a word. But, it was interesting. It's been sort of, it's not a pandemic depression lockdown project. I started it before last Christmas, before Christmas.
Yeah, it's so fantastic to keep it.
Just because I thought, well, it's just good to go through it all anyway for the children and make a record.
Absolutely.
And also, well, I just so intriguing. I had a card from a suffragette prisoner. I can't remember. All sorts. A fire crew, a nurses unit, a borstal. You name it. There's something from somebody there. And so I'm just glad Mother, I didn't know why she kept them all, whether she thought my grandchildren would like them, or whether she thought one day I might get them all down. I don't know, but interesting. Yes, so I'm having a go. And
brilliant. Well,
Terry who lives not far away, is helping me shape it, and
great.
I'm not clever enough to do all that.
It's wonderful to look through the memories, though, isn't it? My dad kept all my cuttings for me.
Did he? Oh, you've got the same, yes.
And when I came to write my book, my dad just said, here's a box of cuttings, and there's just all these cuttings on the floor.
Oh, yes.
Got them there, so it was great to sit through them.
No, she has done them in years.
Oh gosh.
She's done them in, for my first Wimbledon 57.
Yeah.
When I was 16, and right through, she's put them, and the letters are in years. So
brilliant.
That's something. That's a help, having got to sort that out. But,
good. And you've got some objects to show us?
Yes, I've got the racket. This is the miniature racket that I used in my final.
Really?
That's a miniature of it, the Slazenger Challenge, the wooden racket. So I've got that. I've got the cup that I won for the French
Open Championships.
French Grand Slam.
Yeah.
Notice the check's not there for the million.
Oh, is that euros or francs or pounds?
Sorry?
Euros or francs or pounds?
Pounds.
Pounds, wow. You spent it.
I probably would have done, actually, Alastair. Yes, I'm sure. I'm not very good at saving. But it's nice to have as a memento.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've got a telegram here from Winston Churchill.
Gosh, how's that, Howard? Can we see that?
Possibly if you take it just a bit further back from the computer, Christine.
I mean, I've got 3, but that's one of them.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Okay.
So I'm very proud of that. I did meet him, and I met Frank Sinatra. I don't know which is more important, but in the days when you got sort of entertained and taken to studios and what have you, I met Frank and Dean Martin and Shirley MacLaine. So it's a very glamorous time to be playing, and you know, I'm sure they have a lot of fun now, but it was quite a special time for me. And I thought I'd just keep, I mean, this is one of the scrapbooks at 16 when I reached my first semi-final. And that's Betty Pratt, who I beat. I beat her to get to the semi-final. So I didn't know what else you wanted. I've got a plate here. This is runner-up for the American.
Gosh.
Again, without the check.
Brilliant. That's lovely to see. It's
so,
great.
You know,
it's great that you've kept those and we're able to see them, because, you know, memories, obviously visual objects and memories and spoken memories obviously help people to
to
get their conversation going and to spark their own memories. So we're very grateful for that. And can we just talk about that? You broke onto the scene really as a 16-year-old.
At 16, that was when I was unseeded at Wimbledon, and as it might be today, one wouldn't expect a 16-year-old to come through. And well, I did, and I beat Shirley Bloomer, as she was then, who was our number 1. I beat her on the first Saturday of Wimbledon, and then played at the quarterfinal on Tuesday against Betty Pratt, the American Whiteman Cup player, who was 32. So she's a lot older than me, but everyone said, you know, she's got the experience that obviously I hadn't. But and then I won and reached the semi-final in 1957, which was the first time since Lottie Dodd in 1897. Wow. So there was a long gap, and I always wanted to be good young, and I'm not a dramatic person, but I always felt it was rather dramatic and invigorating. So I was just sorry I couldn't emulate her record, because Lottie Dodd actually won Wimbledon at 15, but the age limit is 16 now. It did go down for a little while to 15, but it's back to 16 again, and it was 16 in my day, so you had to be 16 to play at Wimbledon.
It was wonderful to get that far. Presumably the media and the crowds took you to their hearts, and that must have been quite a shock for a 16-year-old.
It was. I mean, I thought it was sort of not what I expected to sort of be, you know, to reach the semi-finals was what I was aiming at. And I was sort of flattered that people were sort of full of praise, but you didn't sort of really expect all the other that went with it, with being a household name, was very different.
And how did you take to that, and how did your family, your parents react to that?
I think I was surprised when I got back from, we were, you know, in those days there wasn't accommodation, you know, weren't staying in some 5-star hotel near Wimbledon. I was staying at home in Woodford Green, where I lived, and so we were driving backwards and forwards to Wimbledon. And after reaching the semi-final, we got home and there were press and photographers waiting in the back garden for me to get back, and you know, I was thinking, goodness, what are they doing here? You know, why are they here? They were, you know, there to record and take pictures of me arriving home, and 16-year-old sort of thing. So that was sort of, yes, quite overwhelming.
And how did your parents and your family react?
My father never really was a person who reacted very much to anything in particular. He always followed my tennis progress, but he never took time off work to watch me play unless I was in the final. He said, you know, he that was his way of conducting his life. And he always said to people, I played a bit of tennis, and he enjoyed following it, but he never ever came and watched unless I was in the final. Not even at Wimbledon. I was in 3 semi-finals, but he didn't watch.
And the adulation and the hero worship that followed, how did they respond to that? You were a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah, I think that they were surprised. They were pleased for me to have the success because they realized how much I wanted that and how much practice and many hours of hitting tennis balls had gone into it. So from that point of view, they were very happy for me that it had paid, the hard work had paid off. But I think they couldn't quite believe. I mean, I was in Madame Tussauds at 18, so one of the waxwork models. And that sort of thing was sort of beyond what you would imagine would happen for being a good tennis player.
Absolutely. And so how did it all start? Why tennis? Why did you get involved, and how did it all begin?
Well, my parents actually met at a tennis club in Phillipbrook Road in Leytonstone. That's where they lived and that's where they met. And so before the war, they enjoyed tennis and went to Wimbledon and saw Suzanne Lenglen, Fred Perry, and all the names of that day. So they were great followers of the game long before I came along. And after the war was over, some neighbours found a tennis net in their garage, and they said to my parents, would they like to use that, because they knew how interested they were in tennis. And we had a large enough garden to put the tennis net up and mark out a court. It was a bit of a slope with a path along one end, but Humphrey, I'm number 5 of 6, Alastair. So Elizabeth, Philip, Humphrey, and Isabel spent many hours playing a family doubles on this court. And I was always told I was no good and I couldn't join in. And I think that's nothing makes you more ambitious to do something and be told by older brothers and sisters that you're not good enough. So that was my initial spur. And, large families, you expected to wait your turn, really. I wasn't thinking, oh, why can't I have a go? I was thinking, well, I've got, my turn will come. Tell my grandchildren I'm still waiting for my own bike because I always got the hand-me-downs that broke. But, that was the way it was. So I think looking back, that was certainly a spur to, had to wait. And finally, my sister, older than myself, was having tennis coaching and she was ill. And I was thrilled. I thought she might get better, but she didn't, fortunately. And I was able to have her tennis lesson. So I was 9, which is quite old by today's.
And your first coach obviously saw something.
And yes, Herbert Brown, my first coach, was becoming quite well known in Essex. And he was rather like Arthur Roberts, who coached Sue Barker and Angela Mortimer in Devon. They weren't great players, but they had a wonderful knack of infusing youngsters to play the game. So
once you discover you've got talent, what was the process to get through to be in the sort of national and the Wimbledon setup?
I was, I think, very fortunate in that there were a lot of tournaments on, which I would say if I was I wouldn't criticize today because everything's so different, but I do think that youngsters need competitions to enter and play to improve, and you can't just turn up at Wimbledon or Queen's or Eastbourne. You have to have it's a gradual process. You have to have stepping stones, and certainly I had that advantage, and I played tournaments near home, and I finally made my name when I was into the Evening News. You're probably too young to remember the Evening News, but that was an evening paper in London, and they ran a tournament across the home counties for youngsters between the age of 12 and 15, and you played in your area first, and the semi-finals and finals were to be at Queen's Club in London. So I got through to the semi-finals, and actually I won the tournament. And Dan Maskell, who was then, if you remember, he was the commentator, BBC commentator. He was then the Lawn Tennis Association professional.
Right. And
he was watching and came and congratulated me after I'd won and asked me to join his the LTA scheme, which meant going to Wimbledon and Queen's Club for coaching with him, which was a huge step up and the next stage for me. And to be practicing at Wimbledon with the centre court on the background made it feel it was possible. I could play there one day because it became familiar. And I thought, you know, I can get there, I can do this. And sometimes after our practice sessions, Dan Maskell would take me through the double doors with the inscription by Rudyard Kipling, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same. And he actually took me onto the centre court and he said to me, Christine, I just want you to feel that grass beneath your feet because one day you'll play. Yeah. And I could sort of visualize myself in a way. I sort of thought, well, it is possible. And so that was a big advantage to be able to be doing that. And then at Queen's Club, the practice continued indoors, which was another big advantage to have indoor practice throughout the winter. And I then played more tournaments and started to win the under 18 events age 12. And I think when people say, how do you recognize somebody being good? I think that they have to be above the level of their contemporaries to show that there's something a bit more, promising there. And certainly at 12, I was winning under 18 events and our junior championships, which was held at Wimbledon in September, not the junior event that runs at Wimbledon, but our own event. And at 14, it was an under 18 event. I reached the semi-final and lost to Anne Hayden. Anne Jones, as she is now, who became Wimbledon champion in 1969. And I lost in a long 3-set battle, which took 2.5 hours. And sometimes my parents promised me something if I'd done better than expected. And I'd seen this transistor radio in my local shop window, and I thought it was absolutely wonderful, hideous, but I thought it was wonderful. And they said, yes, well, if I won Junior Wimbledon, they would get that for me. And I thought losing the semi-final after 2.5 hours was perhaps close enough. But Mother, who was a stickler for, her sticking to what she had promised, said no. And I had to wait a whole year round. The transistor radio was still there to show you how popular it was. And this time I beat Anne Hayden in the final. And so at 15, I was the junior champion and winning senior tournaments now. I was very tall, horribly tall, taller than all the juniors and all the seniors mostly. And that made that difficult transition from junior to senior tennis, I think, much easier because, I was sort of the same size as they were and more. And so from 15 to winning senior tournaments in Junior Wimbledon, the next year was 16 when I actually reached the semi-finals. And then that, I feel for people who have those difficult decisions, especially nowadays with education being so tricky, that to decide whether you want to do a sport or not over education. For me, I'd left school before those decisions came. So I'm a parent myself. I know I didn't do it with my own children, but no, for me, it worked because the success was motivating and I didn't have to have those doubts of wondering if I would make it in the senior game because I had made it at 16. So, I was seated number 1 at Wimbledon at 18, the youngest man and woman in Britain since the war. So I was there.
And presumably you were now on this, what is now called the circuit.
Yes, yes. I mean, at 16, after I lost the semi-final, I was chosen for the Whiteman Cup team, which was going to America. And that was huge for me at 16 to be traveling overnight on a flight to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and for the first Whiteman Cup match there, and then traveling around the East Coast and ending up playing in the US Nationals at Forest Hills, the West Side Club. So it sort of progressed for me like that. I didn't have those thoughts of, should I, could I, what, should I be doing this? It sort of was a general progression, and I suppose I enjoyed practice. I think if you're motivated, you don't find the practice hard work. I had a very interesting coach who believed in my potential and never gave up on me. And you have to have a lot of things that work together to make it happen. and a bit of luck along the way. So I count myself lucky, really.
A 16-year-old away from home, a long way away from home. Did you miss home, or was it all part of the?
Well, funny enough, when you said that I miss home, mother had always had to drive me to tournaments and take me to tournaments and came with me. And going to America was the first time I went anywhere without her. So it was quite a wow moment. I thought, my goodness, I've really grown up now. So I didn't miss home on that occasion, but Maria, when I was number 2 in the world at 18 and Maria Bueno was number 1, I'd won the French and she'd won Wimbledon. And then I lost her in the final of the US. And so she was 1 and I was 2, and we were invited to tour Australia. And that was a long tour of 4 months. And that I found the first time was hard, going away. And, you know, one didn't have a team around you. I met Maria, I flew from London to Sydney. I met Maria in Sydney, and Harry Hopman, the late Australian Davis Cup legendary captain, and his wife was chaperoning us some of the time. But it was a long time to be on my own with Maria, of course. We both felt it. We both felt we were targets in a way. We had nothing to gain, everything to lose. So the pressure was on us to do well. And if you felt sort of you felt dented if you lost, and it was so that was a time when I did feel homesick. Yeah.
And when you're thrown together like that, do you develop friendships with the people that you're going to play against, or is it rivalry?
Never quite the same in an individual game. As you well know, team games, there's much more camaraderie. And my husband was a very keen rugby player, and it didn't matter where we went. We could go to the back of beyond in a tiny beach somewhere, and somebody would sort of pop out who'd been in the second row somewhere, who he knew from Sudan. But that didn't happen with tennis, really. It's an individual game. And Maria and I were together that long, and although well occupied playing tennis, practicing, and etc., and well looked after, there was always a slight distance between us. She was number 1, and I think she was very proud of that. And I was number 2, and I felt like I was playing second fiddle. And I was a great admirer of Maria anyway. I felt she was one of the most exciting players that I've ever seen. And, so it's difficult to be close friends, but we did meet every Wimbledon. She was working for the media, as I was, and we always used to meet up. And I think we both respected each other. And we always went back to reminiscing about the trip to Australia, which was extraordinary. I mean, you can't imagine Serena Williams and Petra Kvitova suddenly going off somewhere together for 4 months. I mean, it would be on their own. It would be unheard of. So it was an unusual situation, but it had its good points.
And when it came to playing against Maria, you said you admired her as a player. Was she the toughest opponent, or was there somebody?
She was for me. I don't know why, because the one time I beat her was in Caracas. We were both playing on the Caribbean circuit, and I reached the final, and she was in her home, on her home territory, really. And she got nervous, and for once I won. And I was as surprised as she was, and the crowd were very disappointed that, I won. But I lost to her in the majors. I lost to her in the semi-finals of Wimbledon. I lost to her, as I just said, in the final of the American. And I lost to her in Australia in 3 finals. And so I sort of, I reached the semi-final of Wimbledon in 1960, and here I was going to play her again. I never went on court thinking I might lose. I always thought I could win. And I didn't feel I could lose to her. And yet there was something that I didn't feel I could win either. And we had a humdinger of a 3-setter, and she always said it was the best match she played at Wimbledon, which was very generous of her. But it was just she was just one of those people I could not beat. I had to hope she was in the draw where someone else would beat her. But no, she was probably all the players I know since the game has become professional. She must have missed out hugely because she was a star.
You weren't so bad yourself. How would you describe your style? How did you play? You
Well,
aggressive into the
I mean,
net?
I was tall. I was big, tall, and strong, as it pointed out to me many, many times in the press too. But and obviously, you know, I enjoyed having a sort of an aggressive game. I had a good serve, a powerful serve. My main shot was my forehand, a winning shot, and I still maintain that sometimes a winning shot is better than being completely even all round because it's more dangerous. And certainly for me, my forehand was dangerous. My backhand was a weakness, it was a slice, but now whenever I watch the television, I hear the commentator say, "Oh, good gracious, look at that slice, it's so effective." And I'm thinking, yes, it was effective in my day too. But it's become, even with the two hands, as a shot that they're developing, a slice backhand. And I like to volley, and of course I had a huge reach for the volleys and the smashes. So if I could get into net, that's where I like to be.
We're talking about the slice, and the rackets were so different.
Yes,
Weren't-
yes. I mean, gone is this sort of thing, the wooden racket.
Yeah.
It is different, and of course, playing now, you know, I'm happy to use a lighter model frame of graphite, but all the equipment has changed, and things like the tie break I've never played a tie break in my life. I had long sets. I played a set with Billie Jean King, 21-19. You know, the matches went on and on, but that's all very different. But the equipment and the attention to detail is so much greater than anything I would have known.
And the preparation, the training, how much training did you do and compared to?
Well, I'll quote Rod Laver on this because at Wimbledon 5 years ago, my children came with me, and because I know Rod Laver well, obviously we played at the same time, but I introduced them to Rod Laver, and they said, "Oh, how did you keep fit?" You know, thinking, which I thought was actually quite cheeky. But anyway, he said, "Well, I played singles, doubles, and mixed. And then when we got back to the hotel in London, our captain, Harry Hopman, made us run around the Serpentine. It was a 5-mile run in the evening. And they were absolutely staggered." And so it wasn't a pushover. People weren't unfit in the amateur day. That's an example of Rod Laver. And when I lost the semi-final at Wimbledon, I was obviously disappointed, and I had a very nice letter from Maureen Connolly, who was another hero of mine. She'd won all the Grand Slams by the time when she was 19, and she wrote a very sort of supportive and encouraging letter, and she was saying, you know, the hours and hours of practice are worthwhile, and I thought that was quite telling, because people tend to think that maybe people like Maureen Connolly or Louise Brough, that they had a cucumber sandwich and went out and played tennis. It wasn't like that at all. They were probably as dedicated and trained as they could be for that time.
But it was more on the court than in the gym, presumably.
The gyms hadn't come into popularity at all, let alone gym wear, leisure wear. I mean, I can't believe the variations. I see my own daughters and granddaughters, you know, these leotard things and everything. There was nothing like that when I first went to practice up at Queen's and Wimbledon. I got, you know, mother's homemade dress and a cardigan, and you just ran around to keep warm. Gymnasiums had to ride, but skipping was always a popular training substitute. And eventually at 16, I started to have training with Jeff Dyson, who maybe a name you remember. He was the amateur athletics coach.
Yeah.
And he swore by circuit training. I don't know whether that still happens, but circuit training, he said, was invented by some Cambridge, not graduates, Cambridge dons, who wanted to do some exercise 10 minutes a day. They didn't want to spend all day at it. And they came up with this series of exercises, which was a circuit. You did it at a time, and 3 times around, and you could see if you were improving. You know, the first time I did it, I think I took half an hour, but I got down to about 9 minutes in the end. So we weren't not training, but not in gyms, gymnasiums, and I danced. I did a lot of dance training, so I wasn't not fit, I didn't think.
You mentioned the equipment. Obviously, it was Wimbledon had the all. Did all the tournaments have the all white?
Yes, I don't know that it was a rule. I just think that it was accepted that tennis you wore white. I didn't know that there was a rule about it, but Wimbledon then stuck to it when kit did change, and you wore any, all sort of variety of, or anything you like really. But Wimbledon stuck to the all white, as do 1 or 2 other clubs, like Queen's and Hurlingham, and some tournaments like to keep it to all white, which, being old-fashioned, I like to see.
And what about endorsements and use of?
You must be joking, Alastair. Endorsements, what are they?
Well, exactly. It's after my time as well. But
yeah,
I did read somewhere about the revolution that started with Stan Smith, I think, wasn't it, when he started getting endorsements to wear the tennis shoes. But you presumably got your own kit, and
from the age of 14, Ted Tingling, who was a well-known dress designer, he dressed me, made my dresses, so took care of that. Sassinger's provided me with rackets and Dunlop green flash shoes. So I did not have to fund those. But endorsements and money, no. I know once I won a typewriter and the Ladies' Razor in Puerto Rico, and I had to bring a letter home to say that these were prizes. Quite difficult to pack a typewriter, I can tell you. That, prizes were sort of varied, but vouchers were the big thing you won. At Wimbledon, for my losing finalist, I got £15 in a voucher form, which couldn't be spent at a sports shop. It had to be spent on something that wouldn't make you professional. And £10 for my 3 semi-finals. I'm surprised the prize money never went up. It was £10 in 1957, £10 right through until 1964, I think. So, you could save them up, but it didn't buy a lot. Even in those days, I got a picnic hamper once, and which I still have, which is very, very nice to have. But no, it was very much the amateur days.
And how strictly was it enforced? I mean,
well, in my day, it was strictly enforced. Certainly in the ladies' game. I'm not sure if the men there wasn't a few more enticements, but because, as I pointed out, my transition from junior to senior tennis was sort of boom, boom. I was there. Yeah. Invitations globally were how I managed to play around the world, and being invited to the Caribbean or Australia or America, it didn't cost. I wasn't paying for it, and I think actually, from a female point of view, I felt that was a sort of preferable way to travel, because it can be quite lonely on the circuit on your own if you're just dependent on prize money and where you can afford to stay. When I was invited, I was looked after, and that was certainly for me a more, I don't know. I would prefer that rather than wondering if I was going to lose in the first round, or not that I ever thought I would lose in the first round, but it's a problem for people traveling now. They have to, it's all right for the top ones who are making their millions, but there are a lot who are starting out and the circuit's tough, and you go to places where the facilities aren't good and the setup isn't good, and you earn peanuts, and yet, you've got to get your ranking points. You have to start at this level, and that's another side of the game we don't hear much about, but it is very tough now.
When you look back on, when you look at the prize money that's on offer now, do you ever have any regrets? I could have been worth millions and millions of pounds and all that sort of thing?
No, because I can't help feeling how lucky I was to do what I did, and to also be able to marry and have a family, which was also what I wanted in life, and to enjoy that, and to obviously, you know, that we weren't sort of overflowing with money to spend, but you know, we were able to enjoy the family and do the things that families do, and that to me, I felt I got a double whammy by being a sportsman and also having a family.
And afterwards, you were able to keep in touch with the game through commentary and
Absolutely.
doing a lot of watching.
Yes, I mean the commentary was a huge bonus, and I looked forward to it every year, and it was a way of keeping up with all the friends that I'd made at tennis and saw them every year at Wimbledon, and it was like a working holiday. And we did Eastbourne as well then, and it was, yes, it was a wonderful team too, as you probably remember our team. It was just fun. It wasn't like work at all, and the program was very well supported. It was on Radio 2, and I didn't know, I met all sorts of persons. I sat next to Tom Hanks for one match. I absolutely made my whole fortnight. You know, things like that happened, and people came into the studio. Pierce Brosnan was another person who came into the studio, and just reading the top of my head, Joyce Grenfell, Chris Evans came one year, and he's still going strong on his broadcasting. But it was a magical time, and that was another bonus. I did a couple of adverts. I did Can't Be Whiter Than White with Daz, and Nothing Tastes Better Than Flora. So, you know, that was good fun to do. So there were a lot of spin-offs from the heyday, and even talking to you today is a spin-off from the heyday, and I enjoy it. I still enjoy that. But
what would you say to a 16-year-old girl now going into playing at Wimbledon or starting off in her career? What advice could you give?
Never think it's out of your reach. It's possible. It's sometimes the picture is painted that you've got to do this, you've got to do that, and you won't make it if you don't do that, and you do it so far off that it seems that it's beyond what's possible. And I always say that believe it, you can do it. It's not impossible. And my coach used to quote to me, I'm not sure if it's Oscar Wilde, but it's anything is possible. Miracles take a little longer, which is what I sort of swear by in a way. And don't wait. If you wait forever, which I think is another telling point. That don't think, well, I'll do this and then next year I'll do that. Don't wait. Go for it. And I do think for any youngsters now, don't think, well, you can't do it. You're only 16, you can't do it. You could do 16, you've probably got as much chance as anybody else. And it's possible.